All right, hello everybody. Welcome. I recognize a few of your names. Welcome to the 3D CAD and a little bit of 3D printing class level 2. This is me. So if you took the level 1 class from me, you might recognize me. If you're brand new, don't worry. I'll take some time to get you into Onshape. And this first class will be a bit of review and building on some of the basic skills in CAD so that we can really jump in and get moving starting next week in class 2. At any point, by the way, if you have any trouble hearing me, if you can't see my screen, if I'm talking too fast, anything like that, just let me know. You can always feel free to unmute and ask me a question, or you can type in the chat and I'll occasionally be looking at that as well to see if you have any questions. So maybe just so I can get a confirmation that I'm not talking to an empty room, maybe type something in chat or react in Zoom. All right, thumbs up, great. So yeah, our goal with the second class, as opposed to the first class, now that you've hopefully all had an introduction to CAD, probably through Onshape, we're going to continue to help you develop your proficiency both with CAD and with a lot of CAD adjacent skills, such as reading technical or engineering drawings. We're also going to learn a bit about the applications of CAD, like manufacturing, and we're going to try to push you to take more independence in your learning by completing some assignments and practice work outside of the class time as well. So it's definitely a step up from the level 1 class if you were here for that. And to give you a bit of a bird's eye view of where we're going, this is an 8-week session. So we'll have 8 classes every week, same time, 6:30 on Saturday. And so for the first 3 weeks, the plan is we'll take you through a short little project where we'll model what's called a universal joint. And I'll explain what that is next week when I'll properly introduce the project. But most of that will be done like on your own after I introduce you and like help you with the first part of that. We're going to do a bit of review of Onshape and CAD. So after I finish this little like introductory talk, I'm going to ask you if you used Onshape before. If you have, take some time while I'm talking in the background here to open up Onshape and log in. Maybe actually, now that I'm talking about this, if you do not have Onshape account, or if you have some difficulty, let me know in the chat right now, or like as you find out. So I guess the best way to do this, if you have access to Onshape, say yes. And if you do not have Onshape, say no. But no matter who you are, say something in the chat so that I can account for everybody and make sure I'm not leaving anyone behind. Okay, I see one no. Great. So I linked in the chat a slideshow. These are the Onshape instructions. If you need my help, I can take a few minutes to go through this with you, but hopefully, if you're able to, just go to these slides and follow the directions. They're pretty step-by-step, and it should take you through creating an account. And if you have any questions about this, let me know, but hopefully by the time I'm done talking, you can set something up for yourself. That's directed at Alan, especially. All right. So as I was saying, that's the first part of the class. And the last thing in the first part of the class, the new thing that we're trying to introduce is the idea of a drawing. And a drawing is something that we're going to start using a lot. And if you ever go out and study engineering, especially mechanical engineering, you're going to find yourself reading a lot of drawings. So it's good to start now, get accustomed to what they are, how they're used, and things like that. The second part of the class, weeks 4 through 6, we're going to have our longer term project. This is the one that is kind of the main meat of the class, perhaps. And you're going to model a steam engine based on a set of drawings provided by or created by somebody on the internet. And we'll learn a bit more about like the practical aspects of how you would use CAD in real life, like taking parts that someone else has made and using them to create your own designs and assemblies. And in the last 2 weeks, we'll take a brief period to talk a bit about 3D printing, more about how it's done and how you can design around 3D printing and things like that. So that's the plan. In terms of what to expect, for like our 1 hour sessions together, I'll spend some time at the beginning just talking, and then for the back half of the class, there'll be some work time where you'll be working on perhaps a project or something like that, and I'll either be doing a demo at the same time or guiding you through that. And outside of class, I don't think there's one this week, but starting next week, I'll be pretty regularly assigning you some like homework or project work to spend some time outside of class working on, just because we can't really fit everything in if we're only doing things during the class. So that's all for my intro. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll pause here. Let me know if you do have questions, or if you're trying to create an Onshape account, and if you have any trouble with that, also let me know. You will need your Onshape account in like a few minutes, so maybe not a few minutes, but like in 10 minutes probably. I'd like you to have your Onshape account set up. So send a message in your chat if you said no before. So Alan, once you're good to go, just send me a yes in the chat. I can also, let's see. Yeah, so if you don't have an account and you're not logged in, it takes you to the landing page where it prompts you to log in. But since you don't have an account, at the bottom right here, got your sign up button. And I guess the slides are a bit outdated now. They upgraded their interface, their landing page, but it's the same thing. You just scroll down, education account, you're a student, I'm guessing. So you hit for students, and then you just type in your information as they request it. So is everybody logged into Onshape? Can I get another yes in chat if you are logged into Onshape? Okay. Alan, especially, I'd like you to respond just because you said before you did not have one. So if you need any help, that's what I'm taking the time to do. I can help you set up your account, or if you're good to go, let me know and I'll just move on. No for now. Do you think you'll be able to do it on your own, or do you want me to help you right now? Okay, well, great. I believe in you. All right, so, okay, yeah, don't worry. We'll move slow for this first week, and then next week is when we'll really be jumping in. So just make sure by next week that you have your account and you're good to go. So we're gonna do a very, very quick CAD review in case maybe some of you, it's been a while since you last used Onshape. I know I get rusty with Onshape and I haven't used it in a while, just because I typically use other CAD programs. So once you're logged in, you're going to be, also these classes are recorded. So yes, I would like you to make the account like now while you're here, just because if you have any problems, I can answer your questions. But definitely by next week, you need your account. And if you have it now, it would be nice just so you can do the first activity, but this activity doesn't really affect anything else later on. It's more of a overview. So if you haven't used Onshape before, I'd recommend watching the recording if you can't follow along, just to get familiar with the interface. Okay. So when you log in, you're going to see like something like this. If you have a brand new account, you probably won't have any like projects here. I have a bunch because I've taught this class and other classes a couple times before. So just accumulate documents, but if it's a new account, you might have nothing in there. And the way you create a document is on this top left corner, we have a create button. And the first thing that you can do is create a document. So I'll click on that, give it a name. Some of you, this is all review, so I'll move pretty quickly. And now this takes you inside of the document. And by default, Onshape will create for you a part studio and an assembly. Don't worry about the assembly for now. We're just going to work inside of the part studio. And the part studio, this is kind of our 3D workspace, right? Our controls are, the important ones is left click something to select it. And you can just click on the background to stop selecting it. You can click on multiple things to select multiple things. You can also left click and drag, and that will, if you have multiple entities, that'll typically select your different entities inside that box. Now right click and drag, that is your rotate view. So right now I'm holding right click and moving my mouse around, and you can see it's spinning my view around. So if you're creating your account and what you're using Onshape for is just like a CAD class, maybe if you're going to use it for something else, you can also talk about that. If you're doing robotics or something, you can say that. But at the very least, you're using it for a 3D CAD class. And don't worry too much about it. They will create your account. It's just for their purposes. I guess they're interested. Other controls, you can zoom in by scrolling up with your mouse wheel, zoom out by scrolling out with your mouse wheel. If I didn't mention this before, you should always bring a mouse to class. It's just, it'll be very difficult if you don't have a mouse. So make sure to do that. If you didn't today, that's fine, but in the future, remember to have a mouse. The next important one is your mouse 3. So that's on most mice, that's clicking on your mouse wheel. There's actually a button there. And if you hold that, hold your mouse wheel, your M3, maybe it's a different button on your mouse, and you drag, that just pans your view. So it moves the whole view around to follow your cursor. So again, left click to select, right click to rotate, middle click to move your view around. And if you ever get stuck, on the right here, there's a fancy navigation cube that you can just click to adjust your view. So especially if you don't have a mouse, this can be helpful sometimes to just rotate things the way you want them to be. And all right, that's the basics of how to orient yourself. Now, you can tell me how do we create a 3D object now? What's the first thing that we're going to need to create? What tool might we use? The sketch, very, very good. So as you can recall, this is where all our 3D tools are, right? You're probably familiar with things like extrude and revolve, but we need something to extrude or revolve first. So the way we do that is with the sketch. And for the sketch, it'll always ask you to pick a plane. And by default, we have our 3 planes here, our top, front, and right. And so I'll just start off by creating a sketch in our front plane. All right, and you can see when I do that, now I have this dialog box, I'm in the sketch, and my tools change from my 3D tools to my sketching tools. All right, so now I'll introduce our activity. So one of the very common or popular CAD challenges when you're first learning how to do CAD is to model yourself a chess set. So if you're not familiar with chess, it's a very, very old game. You've probably heard of it, at least. It's a game played with these little pieces that have distinctive and somewhat interesting shapes, right? You got your pawns up here in the front. Got like the king, the queen, the bishop. And what we're interested in today is the rook. That's the castle out here in the corners. And so we're going to try to create a model of a rook using what we hopefully already know about CAD. But if you don't already know it, then we will learn how to do it. So I always like to ask when we are faced with creating something, what shapes do you see? So take a look at the rook. Here's an example of one that I made like a long time ago, but take a look at this, tell me what shapes do you see? Maybe take another step forward. What features would you use to create this basic shape? All right, circle on the bottom. Anyone else? Anything else? So the circle is a big one. 5 curvy trapezoid shapes on the top. Cylinder. All right, great answers. So yeah, given now, I like the answers. Like there's a circle on the bottom. It's kind of a cylindrical shape. So given that kind of circular shape that we're dealing with, would you use an extrusion or a revolution to create this body? And if you forget which is which, extrusion is when you're kind of pushing material out prismatically, like you have your cross section and that gets pushed out into a prism, and your revolve is when you have your profile. You're kind of revolving it, you're sweeping it around an axis of revolution. So that's how we made our donuts, our spheres. Revolution. Okay. And I like that answer because think about it. If you're trying to extrude this, then you'd have to do maybe 4 or 5 different extrusions, right? You need one for the base, you need one for the stem here, maybe another extrusion here. And not all of these are even very pretty extrusions. You'd have to kind of draft them to get that conical shape. So we're going to do a revolve. And so now I want you to take another look at this rook. Given that we're going to do a revolve, I want you to, maybe if you have a piece of paper and a pencil next to you, just draw a picture. Or if you don't, I actually don't have a piece of paper next to me right now. You can just pull up good old MS Paint. And I want you to draw what you think the sketch region would look like and where your axis of revolution would be if you're trying to create this shape, right? So you have your axis of revolution. This is the line that you're sweeping your geometry. And I want you to take a minute to draw what you think the sketch region would look like for you to be able to get a shape like this. Don't worry too much about getting like the perfect final geometry, just like the basic stuff, just to get the main shape. And then we can worry about doing the details afterwards. I'll give you maybe 2 minutes. All right, starting to see an answer in chat. So how about this? If you did yours in MS Paint, or if you did yours on paper and you want to hold it up to the camera, let's get a couple of people to share what they drew for this one, what their sketch region would look like. So just jump in, feel free to share your screen or just share your camera and hold it up to the camera. All right, great. Glad you can join us, Alan. You're right on time for us to start doing the CAD as soon as anyone shares what they're thinking for their sketch. All right, thanks for sharing. Yeah, so I like where you're going with this. Seems like you have a bit of a, I mean, do you want to explain what you're doing, or?
I just made a trapezoid, and then I revolved it around the axis.
Yeah, sounds great. So I'll take the screen back. Alan, I see your message in the chat. Just don't worry, as we jump into Onshape, I'll at the very least try to explain everything so that you can watch the recording, but hopefully I'll be able to do it in such a way that you're able to follow along in real time. All right, so yeah, I like thanks for sharing, Christopher, I appreciate that. And that's the right idea. So the line of the axis of revolution, this first line is going to go right through the middle of our part, right? It's not like offset away from our part, like when we were trying to make a donut. And for the recording, Alan, I think there's a Google Classroom. I haven't checked yet, but I'll look into that later. But usually the recordings will be posted somewhere and you can access them at a later time. But yeah, hopefully that works. Anyway, yeah, so yeah, especially towards the middle here, we're going to have that kind of like trapezoid little shape. And it's really up to you, like how complicated you want to get here. But the very simplest thing is probably, we have our little flared out base here. You have the stem that comes up. And then in the example here, at least, it comes back out again. We have this cylindrical part where the castle bit is, and then it comes back out, something like that. So it's a very rough sketch, but it gives you an idea. Hopefully, if you can't visualize it, try to imagine how this sketch profile will revolve 360 degrees around the line and create basically a shape like this one. Any questions? Okay, so now I'll take a quick second for Alan just to show you what to do. When you're logged in, you probably see something like this, but without, yeah, you probably see something like this, right? And then what you want to do, if you haven't already, is create a document. So in your top left, you create and you hit document, and it'll prompt you to name the document something. Okay, great. So when you're in your document now, the first thing you'll want to do is, I guess, familiarize yourself with the movement controls, but hopefully that's intuitive enough. And then you're going to want to create a sketch. So the first button here is called sketch. It'll bring up this dialog box and it'll prompt you for a sketch plane. And all you have to do is click on, say, this plane here that has the word front on it. And when you do that, you click on it, now you're in the sketch. So just stay here, you're in the sketch, and then you have your sketch tools. I'm going to X out of it because I already made one and I want to go back and edit this one. All right, what we're gonna do now is create that thing that I just drew in MS Paint, but we're going to do it in Onshape. So I guess to introduce everything, just for everyone to be on the same page, the first sketch tool is called the line tool. And as you can imagine, it creates lines for you. So the first time you click, it creates a point. The second time you click, it creates another point. And the line you get is the line that connects those 2 points. So this point that you start off with by default is called your origin. You can see it on your left here in what we call a feature tree. So the feature tree is just kind of a chronological history of everything that you've done in this part studio. So right now I've done nothing except create a sketch. So you can see the only things I have are the default geometry and then the sketch that I just created. But as you keep doing stuff, it'll like start to add up. It'll stack up at the bottom in order of when you did it. So you want your line tool, and you know your tool is selected if it's highlighted. So right now, even if I'm not sure what tool I have, I can see that my cursor is a plus sign. I have those little crosshairs. So that suggests to me that I have a tool active. And which tool do I have active? I look up here, I see the line tool is highlighted. So I know I must have the line tool active. So now that that's going, I'm going to start off the line on the origin. So I clicked on the origin there. You can see it lit up, it got highlighted. And then I'll click somewhere else and I'll click right above it. So if I click, and before I click, you saw there was that icon there, that little white square with a black line. And that was one of my relations. So you might recall relations are the rules that define kind of the geometry, the math of how your sketch entities are allowed to behave, right? So our goal is always to make everything fully constrained, fully defined, such that there's nothing in your sketch that's ambiguous. There's nothing that is not fully constrained, for lack of a better word. But you can see right now, for example, see, I have this vertical constraint, this vertical relation, because I clicked my second point while I had that icon hovering here to the right. And that just means now that I have that relation, whenever I modify this line by clicking and dragging the blue point, the only thing I can change is like where it is vertically, right? I can't like drag it left and right. I can't change the angle because it already has this rule that it can only be vertical. And so I'll make use wherever I can of these like kind of implicit relations that Onshape creates for me so that I don't have to manually create them myself later on. But like, yeah, whenever something like that happens and, you know, if you miss one, for example, you'll know pretty soon because your lines might not turn black when you expect them to. And it's pretty simple to figure out. You just take all your points that are blue and drag them around, and that'll just tell you what you have to do to make it fully defined. All right, so I'll go for a pretty simple shape, something like that. Feel free to do as you please, use your creativity. This one is probably the least constrained thing that you'll be doing for a while, because as we move into drawings, you'll see that there are going to be a lot of rules about exactly what dimensions things have to be. Here, there's really no rules, right? It's your chess piece, do what you want. So looking back at my sketch that I thought through in my head, and hopefully you thought through as well, it looks pretty similar, right? So I know that this more or less will produce the shape that I want when I'm done with it and I revolve it. All I have to do now is to fully define this sketch. And that means turning everything black. So all these blue lines, all these blue points, I'm trying to make them black. So for those of you who are new, right next to our relations here, there's our tool called the dimension tool. You can also hit D on your keyboard, which is pretty handy if you don't want to reach up here and click it every time. But when you have your dimension tool active, I always say this is a smart dimension tool. It'll kind of guess what kind of dimension you're trying to create. So it can help you dimension the length of a line. It can help you dimension an angle. It can do radii, diameters, all kinds of stuff. So I'll just start off, create my first dimension. One warning that I'll give you here, Onshape is a bit unfriendly in the sense that if I were to type in something like 1 inch here, it would shrink this line to make it really short instead of rescaling my entire sketch to make it match my dimension and preserving the proportions. So a lot of CAD programs, if I were to type in 1 inch right now, it would just rescale everything and it would just look exactly the same and it would say this is 1 inch. But Onshape unfortunately does not do that. It'll kind of ruin my sketch, right? It'll do this. Actually, I spoke too soon. It looks like Onshape does rescale it. Okay, ignore what I was gonna say. In any case, when you create your first dimensions in Onshape, a lot of the time, it might mess things up for you. So it might be advisable actually even to like dimension the first line that you draw, just so Onshape like sets its scale and then draw everything from there. But it worked out, so nothing to worry about, I guess. Just go through, take a minute to dimension things until all your lines and points turn into black lines and points. And again, in case I wasn't clear, the distinction between the blue and the black is that the blue ones are underdefined. They have freedom, right? If I click and drag a blue point, it will move and follow where I drag it. And that distinguishes it from a black point, which is fully defined. It's fully constrained. It has enough rules where there's only one solution geometrically to what the sketch can look like. So if I try to take this black point and drag it around, you can see like I can't do it. It won't let me because this point is fully defined, right? So I'll just take a minute to go ahead, go through, assign a number to all of these, and I'm just making these up. I have no idea if it'll look good or not when I'm done with this. I'm just putting in numbers that feel good to me in the moment. So think of this as like an opportunity. A lot of you haven't dimensioned something with as many lines as this possibly. So it can sometimes be a bit of a challenge when you're first starting out to figure out how to add all the dimensions you need without over dimensioning your sketch. And over dimensioning things, you'll know because everything will turn red and it'll break. So whenever that happens, just delete the last dimension you created. You can hit undo here in the top left or hit Control Z on your keyboard. But I'll just go through and create some dimensions. And of course, there is always more than one way to do these things. Like you don't have to dimension things the same way I do. And like it'll probably end up fine as long as you're able to fully define your sketch. If you're ever in a situation where like you're not sure, like just looking at it, thinking about it geometrically, you can't figure out why something is not black. What I always like to do is just find the remaining blue points that I have and try to drag them around. And that usually makes it pretty obvious why it's not fully dimensioned, right? Like just looking at this, like I couldn't instantly tell you why this point is blue, but when I drag it around, I can see the freedom that it has remaining is its horizontal position. So that tells me I just need a dimension I can dimension this line or maybe this one. All right. So I can do something like that, and that's my fully dimensioned sketch right there. You can see that everything here is black, and I can't click and drag anything to move it around. So I'll wait here for a bit. Let me know if you have any questions. Remember, you don't have to do it the way I'm doing it. You don't need to use the same numbers. Right now, nothing matters really. It's just the idea is for you to like break the rust, get yourself back into Onshape mindset, and yeah. So feel free to ask any questions. How do you make it black? So yeah, the way you make things black in general is by adding rules, right? Like we call it fully defined because we're adding definitions, we're adding rules. And so there's kind of two types of rules that we add. The first one is a relation, and the second one is a dimension. So the dimension is all these numbers that I'm putting in. Like these correspond to actual physical lengths. So my default units are inches. So whenever I put a number here, I'm telling Onshape how many inches this should be. So this line is 1 inch long. Even if it doesn't look like it on your screen, like when it corresponds to like a 3D printed model, for example, or in my drawing, it's going to be 1 inch long in real life. The other type of rule or definition that I can put on my sketch is these relations. So if you studied a bit of geometry, you probably, like some of these words are probably familiar to you. And if they are, they mean exactly what they do in here as they do in your geometry class, right? Like a parallel relation, that'll make two lines parallel. A tangent relation will make like two curves have the same gradient at that location. So they'll kind of like smoothly connect into each other. Horizontal is horizontal, vertical is vertical, perpendicular is perpendicular, equal makes things equal, and so on and so forth. Coincident brings things so that they're touching each other, so that they're on top of each other. If you make 2 points coincident, you're turning them into the same point because you're putting them on the same location. So in this case, the only relations that I really manually applied, or not even manually applied, I let Onshape apply are the horizontal and vertical ones. So if they're not horizontal or vertical already, you can manually apply relation to these lines by selecting the tool. You can see it's highlighted. My cursor is a crosshair. And then if I just click on these lines, it'll apply that vertical relation to those lines. But the main idea is, in this case, we're just using our dimensions to make everything black. So if you have things that are not black, for example, you're probably missing a dimension. So you might have something like this where you have a couple of blue lines. And what I would do here is just drag my blue point around, and hopefully you can see this through the zoom lag. I can see that this point is free to move up and down. So that tells me I need a dimension to keep it from being able to move up and down. All right, for the sake of finishing this demonstration in time so that you have it at least for your recording, I'm going to move on from here. But hopefully between this class and the next class, I don't have like a real homework assignment for you. So I guess the homework assignment in place of that is to get yourself familiar with the sketching tools, right? Take some time, like try to make like just try out the tools, right? Most of them are pretty intuitive if just based on like the GUI that Onshape provides. Like they explain what they do. And once you try them a few times, it'll make sense. And if you really have trouble, you can always look up the Onshape like documentation, just like search in your search engine Onshape rectangle tool, and there will be a pretty good explanation of how to use the Onshape rectangle tool. In any case, when you're done with the sketch, as you know, you hit the check mark, and that tells Onshape that you're good. You're done with the sketch. If you want to go back and edit it, you can right click it and hit edit. That takes you back inside. And when you're done, you just hit the check mark again and you're done. So now we're going to execute our plan, which was to use the revolve tool. And the way I do that, I hit my revolve tool, brings up another dialog box, and it asks you for two things. Remember, the extrude asks you for one thing, revolve asks you for two things. And that is the sketch region. That's this shape that I just drew. And the second thing is the axis. So if you recall from that sketch that I drew, this vertical line right in the middle, this is my revolve axis that I want. So once I select that, I see a preview. This is indeed what I was expecting, so I'm good to go. I'm gonna hit the check mark and I'll get my shape here. So I'll give you a moment to catch up to that, to do the revolve. If you're falling behind, don't worry. I would say just take the time between this class and next class to like complete the demonstration, so like make your tesseract. And if you can do that, then you'll probably be set for class 2. All right, so we're getting pretty close. We have the body of it. We have the main features. Like you could believe that this is meant to be a tesseract, but it's still not quite done yet. The biggest thing that's missing is the little castle parts, square parts on the top. And those we're going to have to make with another feature, right? Like we can't exactly change our sketch in any way to create those features because it's kind of, it exists along another direction in a sense. So not to spoil the mystery or anything, but the way I'm going to choose to do it is a revolve cut and then a pattern. So I'll go back to, I'm in my 3D view right now. I'm not in a sketch right now. And I'm going to create another sketch. Same idea, hit the sketch tool. That brings up my dialog. Here I am. And I'm going to create a sketch right on the top of my tesseract. So you're probably going to have this disk, this annulus. I'll just click on that. And now you can see this is my sketch 2 plane. You can see it faintly here. If I move around, you can see this plane. Onshape basically created a plane for me right on that surface that I clicked. So if you haven't done that before, it's pretty big news. You can actually create a sketch on any flat surface just by clicking on it. And what I'm going to do is, let's see, I'm going to create a circle from the center all the way up to here, and another one from here to here. Oops, that wasn't centered. From here to here. And my goal here is to make these two circles match up with the top of my rook, right? I want this circle to match this circle, and I want this circle to match this circle. And so I can do that pretty simply with the coincident relation. Just my coincident tool right here. Again, forewarning that if your monitor is a different like aspect ratio than mine, some of these tools might just be displayed like side by side along your screen instead of being in a drop down. Or alternately, maybe I have a bunch of tools that are kind of laid out side by side that you have in a drop down menu. So if you ever can't find a tool, just click on these little triangles and usually they'll be in there somewhere. Okay. So I take my coincident tool, make these circles coincident. And you can see what I've done now. Hopefully you can tell, but there are these bolded circles. Those are my sketch circles, and they line up with the top of my rook now. So if you were in one of the classes that I've taught before where we did a sprocket machine, then this might start to look familiar. The next thing we're going to do is create a line. It's just like the sprocket. We're going to create one of the bits that we're going to cut out, and then later we're going to pattern that bit so that we have multiple. So this region here, the one that I just clicked on, I think someone described it as trapezoidal earlier. This is the bit that we want to cut. So just to finish fully defining this thing, I'm going to use my dimension tool. Remember, it's a smart dimension tool. So if you try to dimension two lines that intersect, or at least are not parallel, even if they don't intersect on your sketch, it'll bring up an angle. So the same dimension tool, the exact same thing that we use to make lengths, can also be used to make angles. So I'll click, put in a number, say 30 degrees. Now the sketch is fully defined, right? So not much to that sketch, just making those two circles, making those circles coincident to like these parts of the rook. Geez. All right. And then making those two lines and creating an angle between them. And I know I'm starting to move a bit faster now. I do need to finish this demonstration for this class. So it's all out there for you to access on your own time between the classes. But if you have any questions at the end, I can take a minute to help you answer them. Next thing we're going to do is cut. So I believe I covered this in the previous class, but the extrude tool, the same one that you use to extrude and create things, like your first cube, you probably created with an extrude. It can also be used to cut. And the way you do that is to switch from the new or the add. Instead of those, we want remove. It's the third tab here. I'm going to click on this little sort of trapezoidal shape that I made, and I'll use a blind cut. Remember, blind means that Onshape isn't looking where the cut's going. It's just going until it's done. Although now that I say that, actually I might use a different type of cut. I might just do up to next. Okay, I'll not do that. I'll do up to face. And I'll select this face. You can see what that does. Instead of blindly going the distance that I typed in for a blind extrusion, instead it goes up to a face. And I selected the top face here. And Onshape, instead of extruding blindly, it extrudes until it sees that it's reached the next feature that you're interested in. So that's that. All I did was select this profile that I drew. I changed the option from blind to up to face, and then I clicked on the floor here, kind of the floor of the castle, right? So that's my cut made, and I'm almost done. Last thing I'm going to do is pattern this feature. So whenever you're trying to make a bunch of things that are pretty much the same but slightly different, kind of like this, I'm trying to make a bunch of the same cut, except just slightly rotated with respect to each other. Instead of doing them all as separate features, what I'm almost always going to do is use a feature pattern of some kind. So the feature pattern is somewhere in the middle of your toolbar of tools. By default, it might be this one, which is linear pattern, but that's not what we want. We want the one that looks like this. We want the circular pattern. So I'll create that. Now, this is a bit tricky. Some of you may have seen me go over this before. Some of you might be brand new, but just be careful here. By default, Onshape creates a part pattern, and that means it's going to pattern your parts. So like, remember, I'm in Part Studio 1. Everything that I've created, this whole body is considered a part. So I'm not trying to pattern everything. I'm not trying to pattern this entire thing that I just created. I'm actually just trying to pattern the cut that I did. The cut is a feature, so I want the feature pattern. Now the feature that I want to pattern, that is this extrusion that I did. So I'll click on that. You can see it shows up here. The axis, I need to click on this field now to tell Onshape that I'm telling it what axis to use. For an axis, you can actually use any cylindrical face. Pretty handy. So if I just click on this cylinder here, you can see that it accepts that as my axis. By default, it picks 360 degrees. You can leave that at that. For instances, you can pick a number based on your preferences. I think 4 looked okay there. And by default, it's equally spaced. So don't worry about any of that. The only important things are you're changing from a part pattern to a feature pattern. You pick the feature. So in your feature tree, you can just click on extrude 1 or whatever it's called. You click on that, then you select this field, your pattern axis, and for your selection, you can just pick on any cylindrical face. So this one would work. I think even conical faces work, but you'd have to try it. And then you just type in your number of instances, and that'll hopefully work. Taking a minute for me. Let's see. I didn't like that. Let's see what's wrong. All right, so whenever you're doing things like, whenever you're doing CAD, things will go wrong, and don't feel bad whenever that happens. Happens to everyone, and the important thing is to figure out what happened, right? So something was wrong with that circular pattern. And in this case, I think you just have to check this box that says apply per instance. And it likes that. So I'm not sure I can explain exactly what that was, but I think it has something to do with when it's cutting this geometry. It may have to do with the fact that the sketch region that I was selecting was exactly like sharing a boundary in the outer and inner circles. So there may have been some like mathematical weirdness going on there when I was trying to pattern that. And if it's not like perfect, like there might be a tiny bit of error there. In any case, okay, you'll probably have to select that checkbox as well. So remember, just check apply per instance, and that'll probably fix that if you have any troubles there. But with that, I'm going to call this finished. It's not the prettiest looking thing I've ever created, but as you know, you can always go back to the sketches and you can adjust your numbers. You can change your dimensions to kind of push and pull and stretch on it until it looks like what you want it to look like. So that was, I know that was pretty fast at the end. I'll take a couple minutes. I'll stay after a few minutes just to answer questions if you have any. Before we do that, though, I'll just wrap up the class really quickly. So, right. Most weeks we're going to have some homework between classes. This week, it's your first day here. Welcome to the class. The only thing I'll say to do before next class is to make sure you have an Onshape account if you don't have one. I don't think that applies to anyone here, but maybe if you joined late and you missed the beginning, get an Onshape account. It's very important. The second thing is try to finish this chess rook demo. I know you might not have finished it just now, but when the recording is posted, you can like go through and like do it on your own time or at your own pace. And you can also just try to do it yourself. Like, you know what a chess rook looks like. You can always find plenty of pictures online. And with the tools that you know or know how to learn how to use by looking it up online, you can hopefully get to this point by next class. So with that, that's all I have for you today. Again, I'll stick around for a few minutes, but for the class, that is all. So I'll see you again next week at the same time. Hopefully you feel refreshed, ready for CAD, and yeah, thanks for coming.